I had some folk dancing I was going to show you, but we're going to do it separately. I think I told you that and then I didn't bring it up. Okay, well, anyway, we're going to go to Budapest today, and that is part of that GEMS program that got to be too long. So we other part first, and you can see it on the blog if you haven't done it and want to see it. But today we're going to just look at Budapest. Since I split this, it's not one program that's too long, it's two shorter programs. So I'm hoping you get to the recipe that you have. Let me see if I can move my pictures out of the way here. There we go. Okay. So Budapest is a beautiful city, and if those of you who have been there will agree with me, and I'm glad you're here to join and see your pictures again, or my pictures, or my look at it. So Budapest is on the Danube River, as we said, and it's, if you see it here, it's coming from Vienna and down here and makes a 90-degree turn. It's called the Danube Bend, in fact, right in this area. And on my first trip in 2001 with the Grand Circle group, I did visit in this area, and Holoco and a couple other little towns are really very cute. In Holoco, the ladies are dressed in their native dress and invite you in for lunch, where Grand Circle often has home luncheons, which were very nice. But those were pre-digital, so I don't really have those pictures except on slides. So Budapest is straddling the Danube River down a little bit farther, the capital of Hungary, with Buda on one side and Pest on the other. And later on in their history, they joined. And the bridges, of course, now help get across from one side to the other very easily. So just a tiny bit of background on it. We can call Budapest a living museum of architecture, which is another one of my favorite topics. Goes back all the way to Roman times, and if you look, you can find some Roman ruins here and there, and some buildings are built on the ruins of Roman buildings. But you won't find many buildings really in existence before the 19th century because of all the history that went on with people coming in and destroying things and so forth. We know that the Magyars are the original, we say, after primitive people came into Hungary from what we think is between the Ural mountains and Carpathian mountains in Russia. So the Magyars came in on horseback. You know, you see the pictures of the, they call them the Huns, but actually that's not true. It was Magyars. And came with this language that persists into Hungary today. It's a language that's not a Roman language, Romantic language, or Celtic language, or any of those. It's a language all unto its own. A few words are also common to Finnish and Estonian, which is sort of odd, but apparently they split off. A few went up there, but they do have a language all their own. So a very difficult language for most people to learn. And as you see, there are various kinds of architecture that have come down through the ages. And Budapest is really great at mixing some of these architectural styles, which makes it very interesting to look at their buildings. So you saw on the screensaver that I had behind me, the chain bridge built originally in the 30s, the first bridge across the Danube. And if it looks kind of familiar to you, you might think, well, that kind of looks like the Brooklyn Bridge, and you would be right. Because the Brooklyn Bridge is built the same way with the two towers and the chains that hold it up. But that one's a later one, 1883, if I remember right. So this one was previous to the Brooklyn Bridge. And here it is at night. My friend Ava, as I said, was my host in Budapest, and she lived quite near the chain bridge, and we walked everywhere. She didn't even have a car in Budapest. So we walked everywhere, walked across it at night to see some folk dancing. So it was blown up by the Germans in the Second World War, but it was rebuilt quite quickly afterwards. So as we were out at night, we could see the Buda Castle on the hill, and that we'll come to in a minute too. So here's another picture of it at night. So the castle was badly damaged during the war, and some of it was rebuilt. You can see this is the older part, and this the newer. I think it's pretty obvious that it was rebuilt after the war. And it has other things in it besides the parliament. The National Gallery is there. There's a lovely ethnic museum, which I really liked, and the history of Budapest, also the library, the National Library. And there's a good view of it from this side of the other side of the river, which is called the Fisherman's Bastion. A really odd kind of building, and built in the late 1890s. And as you come up on this parapet here, you can see across the river with this great view. And right next to it is the St. Matthias Church. Now, as we found out in the Romanian cities, that the guilds were the ones responsible for building walls and towers. You may remember that. So this wall or this tower was built as part of the castle that protected the Buda castle by the Guild of Fishermen. So it's called the Fisherman's Bastion. And this is the Matthias Church that's right next to it with the statue in the square. And it is known particularly for these very colorful roof tiles. Franz Joseph was crowned here in 1867. It's a beautiful steeple, and all this tile work you'll see elsewhere in Budapest. And lots of frilly stuff, kind of the Gothic part of it. Inside, it's rather dark. This is lightened up a little bit to see it, but you'll see lots of frou-frou on the ceilings and paint, and quite heavily decorated. So if you're on the Fisherman's Bastion, this would be the view that you would have across the Danube. And now what you're looking at is the Parliament. So if you're looking at these two domes, the red one or the pinkish red is the Parliament, the blue dome is the Buda Castle. This is Hungary's largest building. It's called a Gothic Revival, so it has some of the elements of Gothic in it, but the rounded arches and the pointed various places. And again, interesting tours through that. This is a side view of it. It is the House of Parliament, as I had said earlier, and lots of gold in it. The Parliament was not in session when I visited on a tour with Eva, but it is quite elaborate inside. And of course, I headed for the Ethnic Museum. That's one of my other interests, is the national dress of these various countries, because I was a folk dancer and a traveler, and I'm just interested in that. I have bits of costumes, and when I go to folk dance, not anymore, but when I did go to folk dance parties, and they were a particular country that you were supposed to dress up as, I had ethnic folk costume. A little of this, a little of that, a skirt from Portugal and a vest from Hungary and a bandana from someplace else. So I had ethnic clothes, but not really one whole outfit like these people. But I have a lot of respect for these. These are all hand embroidered and hand lace and all this kind of stuff. And different parts of the country had different styles. They would say, well, my village dress is like this. And different things from the homes at that time, which of course we had seen in Holocaust when the ladies fed us lunch. So very painted furniture was very common. Decorated wood objects. Romania is also similar in style. So in this Ethnic Museum, they also have the crown, where kings were crowned with this particular crown. And you see some of the very Baroque decorations, all this fancy stuff you'll see all over Budapest, in the ceilings and lampposts and signs and so forth. One of the landmarks along the river is this statue on the Buda side and Galert Hill. This is Liberty, and she is celebrating liberation from the Nazis after World War II. Just a little bit of a bigger look at her. She's holding the sheaf, I think. This is the back, looking at the back of her. Also up on top of Galert Hill are the thermal baths, and this is an example of Art Nouveau architecture. If you're not familiar with the difference between Art Deco and Art Nouveau, basically it's Art Deco is the pretty straight lines that you'll see. The Art Nouveau has the curly stuff. If you like Anton Mucha's pictures of the ladies with swirling flowers and curlicues around them, that would be Art Nouveau. So this is an Art Nouveau example. And the thermal baths are popular in Europe. If you see a city that's named Bod something, there you can see a thermal bath there. So a lot of Europeans like to go there to take the waters. Of course, we have some in the US as well. But you'll see some of these Art Nouveau and Art Deco. Actually, this would be more Art Deco examples of their architecture and decorative works. So the Renaissance revival styles are very popular too in both Prague and in Budapest. And that I'm talking about these horizontal lines that you'll see. on buildings, horizontal bricks, so to speak. And you'll see that quite often, and also decorated panels would be an example of that. And if you look up, as Ava told me, she said, everything's being stolen at ground level. So look up, they can't get this stuff. So you, as I say, they're great at combining different styles. So you might see this horizontal kind of revival, Renaissance revival. And then up here, you'll see Baroque fancy stuff and all this decorative things. And you'll see Roman, and you'll see everything mixed together. Another example of this Gothic revival, the pointed arch, but also very decorative. They like the tiled roofs. This is on the Postal Savings Bank, one of the Art Nouveau with the fancy rounded tiles all through it. And they really kind of came up with their own style that they called Hungarian, which was the mix, a little bit of everything. We're going to see some more of St. Stephen's in a minute, but this is just a detail of it. You see the Roman pillars and topping on it that you see in Roman columns, and the statuary, very Baroque, Romanesque arches, Baroque statues. So again, all these mixes of things. Again, here we see the horizontal Renaissance revival. So they like their domes, they like their colors, they like their columns. And here we see a couple of them. Too bad about the graffiti, sorry about that. So this is St. Stephen's, the main basilica in town. The basilica not being the cathedral, but it's one of the churches that is consecrated to receive the Pope if he comes to visit. And as we saw in Davenport, Iowa has a basilica, and they have to go through certain steps to make it a basilica. So this is St. Stephen's. It has some of the Roman features, which we see, the pointed arch at the top, just like you would see at the Parthenon. And some of the Roman pillars, some of these fancy domes and towers that are very Austrian, actually. This is the interior of St. Stephen's, also pretty dark, kind of a light, not very good photo of it. And looking up at the dome. And outside in the plaza, they continued their swirls of decorative things in the pavement. And this is the inner city church. It's one of the oldest churches. Remember, Budapest was settled by the Magyars in about 1100 or about 1000. So it's about 1100 years. And this church was built on one of the Roman ruins that I was talking about. And it's an example of 2000 years of history. There's these arch windows, the sides and the rear are Gothic. We've got the Roman right here. These kinds of towers we see all through Austria, Hungary. That seems to be something they like there. So it's one of the oldest churches in town. And all through Budapest, you'll see this grill work. And why Ava said look up is that they're stealing the grill work if it's down at street level. And they being all kinds of people who do that in the dead of night. They come and steal your grill work or your fancy stuff. And what they do with it, I'm not quite sure. But there are lots of clocks, there are lots of signs, there are lots of grill work that you see all through the city. This is a good example of the Baroque with all the curlicues and carvings on it. This is the main train station. And I hope you're noticing, oh, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing this. So sharpen your eyes and see what kind of architectural styles you can see. A little of everything in this train station. And just a street corner again with the fancy lampposts and so forth. Again, revival. I'm not sure where I found this door or who's on there. And anybody remember what the colors mean? The pink is the Parliament. I can't remember where this door came from or who these people are. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you any more about them. I wish I could. The concert hall would have been the place where Liszt and Brahms, Debussy, Bartok played here. And it's an interesting example too combining all these things into what they call a Hungarian style. Little of this, little of that. The Moorish would be this kind of decorative kinds of things. The Opera House, pink, pretty Baroque. And some of these iron gates that we see at street level. Where Eva lived, it was typical of the apartments that were in Budapest. In late 1800s, of course, well, all through the 1800s, you had horse and carriage. So you would have an apartment that would be built around a courtyard where the horse and buggy could come in and drop off passengers. There'd be a stable in the back for them. The iron gate would be closed. So it would be a gated city, basically. So you had even elevators back in those days, late 1800s. And she lived on the 4th floor and had a tiny elevator. You could barely squeeze in 2 people. I'm not sure how they got furniture up there. But she did live in one of these that had an inner courtyard right on the river. And here we see St. Stephen's Downs. Some more examples of these beautiful gates. And she said, you better take pictures of those because they won't be here next time you come.
Are the gates getting stolen too?
Yes, definitely the gates. Sometimes those are on the windows, the ironwork, but definitely the gates are disappearing. There are hardly any left. Maybe by this time there might not be any left. So as I said earlier, going across the chain bridge at night, we did go to a folk dance presentation, folk night out. And I did have a dance to show you, but apparently what I did when I put it in, I didn't check the little box that said include sound. So you can look at it, but I'm not going to really play it. I was going to bring it up later. I can hear the sound, but
we have sound.
You can hear the sound? Okay. Well, good. So look at the costumes these men are wearing, very fancy, and they do very vigorous dancing. This is your Magyar heritage, you know, we're macho guys. And here we see coming in the ladies, and the ladies have much more demure roles. And I do indeed have the black boots and the apron and the vest in my ethnic costume. So now they're pairing up, and you'll hear the music change. Little, not quite as vigorous for the ladies. Again, it's picking up the music, picking up the tempo.
Yeah, we're not hearing the music so much now, but it's okay. It's fun to see them dancing.
Well, I did have that queued up to play from YouTube. We don't have. I just have a little bit left. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a taste of what folk dancing looked like, and what kind of music they played. This is the main boulevard that runs from the Danube all the way down to the Hero Square, Andrassy Boulevard, and right under it, I mean directly under it, if you walk on the street, you can feel the subway right under it. And it's just, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles, maybe not even that long, from the river to the square that we're going to see. But it was the first subway built in Europe, even before the London Underground, and definitely before the ones built in New York and in the US. So this is where it goes to Hero Square. And this is not my picture. I took pictures of it the first trip I was there, and I didn't go back the second time. So these are not the best shots in the world, but they are borrowed. And they were built for the millennium centennial, the multi-million, whatever you call that, of the Magyar conquest. And some of the different rulers of Hungary over the ages are around that square. We also visited a museum that was dedicated to the Russian invasion in 1956. And this is when Ava came to the US. As you remember that after the Second World War, everything was split up and Russia got Eastern Europe countries. And at that time, there was a lot of unrest, of course, in East Germany and in Czech Republic and all those countries. And in Hungary, there was an uprising in 1956, and they came in with tanks, just like picture Tiananmen Square, the tanks running through, gathering up people, a really harsh slap on it. Lots of people were able to come to the United States at that time. Ava came as a teenager and lived in Rochester and now lives in Dallas. So this museum shows some of the people who were some of the heroes of that uprising, the Hungarians who wanted their independence, which they didn't get till 1989, I believe it was. I'm not right about, it might have been 86, I've forgotten now. But in it, there is one of the Russian tanks. There are some monuments to some of the people who were killed in that and who were leaders of that. Some of the, again, some of the people. That's the central market is a huge thing, of course, having the groceries, the meat, fresh food, all that kind of stuff. But also, you know, it's like a big flea market upstairs. You can buy absolutely anything in it. So it's a couple blocks from Ava's house. That's where she does her shopping. As I said, she's on foot all the time. The peppers and garlic, typical in Hungarian food, and some of the little souvenirs.
Mary, can you go back 2 slides to where it showed the vegetables? Were those white carrots?
Hang on. These are turnips.
Oh.
And turnips, eggplant. These might be turnips as well. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
And you've probably heard of Hungarian goulash has some of these vegetables in it. Like many cities, there are lots of street cafes. This statue we're going to come back to in just a minute. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that there are lots of little street places to dine, lots of good food, heavy food, we might say for us, perhaps. Some of the little dolls that you might see dressed in the colorful costumes. This is the friend Ava. She is Ava Vorsch-Marti-Rowe. We call her Ava Gabor because she looks like Ava Gabor, very petite, the white upswept hair. She's standing next to the statue of Imre Nagy. I've heard recently that he was one of the leaders of that rebellion against the Russians. And I've heard recently that that statue was removed from this bridge. Now that they have Orbán as a dictator, he is trying to remove any suggestion of overthrow of anything. Have gotten bad in Hungary. So we are back at that statue we looked at just a moment ago, looking we saw it from the other side, and it's in the right at the end of the main shopping center, shopping district street. Mihály Borsch-Marti is her grandfather, and there's also a street named after him, and we saw his name on other things. And he's in the public square. He was a very, very famous poet. He wrote the national anthem, many plays. He was quite famous in his time. So of course, she wanted her picture taken by his statue. And in recent times, since I've been there, they have put this pavilion around it, which is lit at night. I can't say that I really care for it. It seems better to have it here in the open, but it is what it is. Maybe it was being vandalized or something. I'm not sure of the reason for it, but it doesn't look like this anymore. It looks like this. Another one of the leaders of Hungarian independence is a statue of it for independence in 1956, or the uprising, and that wasn't independence at that time. And around Budapest, you'll see lots of statues of various kinds and monuments to various people. And some of them are just like this, that are fun to look at. This one, not so much. This is a statue, you might say, of shoes. And they're on the banks of the Danube, right in front of the Hungarian Parliament building. And they are a reminder of the people who lost their lives in the Second World War. The Army Cross militiamen were the German people who came in and executed and pulled a lot of people off to concentration camps. And what they did was they would line up about 60 people on here and chain them together, and they would shoot the first person who would then fall into the river, of course, pulling everyone else into the river. So they ruled the country in cooperation with the Nazis. They were part of that Nazi party in Hungary, and many people deported, sent to concentration camps and so forth. So this monument to the shoes is a monument to the people who died in those, particularly along the Danube here, but also sent to camps and murdered at that time. And they're metaled. You can't pick them up and take them home with you or anything like that. They're there permanently. And this one is also on the Danube. There's some little spiky thing. She's supposed to be a fairy, I think. It looks like people have been rubbing her knees, but I got one only at night. And she's kind of the end of our story here, and we're going to have time for your recipe, I believe. This is Ava in one of these beautiful church doors with all the Baroque fancy doodads on it. And so she's our goodbye to Budapest.
Well, before you leave your pictures, in case it would be helpful to go back, we have quite a few questions. So
let's do it.
We're going to go back and start at the beginning and see. So the question, here's a question. Are the cities of Buda and Pest actually one city?
They are now. They were originally two cities. That was back before they had a bridge across it. I'm not sure of the date when it became one city, but it is one city now.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, well, so folk dancing is a big deal at weddings. Did you get to participate in any dancing while you were there?
I did not, but I did go to the Ethnic Museum, as I said, and to a folk dance show. But yes, I really enjoy that kind of music and that kind of entertainment, and I'm familiar with it. I have danced Hungarian dancing and been to Hungarian workshops and that kind of thing. I danced for 30 years or so. So we would often have workshops, and then different weekends that teachers would come in, or Thanksgiving weekend, which is a 4-day folk dance camp, where one night they might have one teacher would be Hungarian, say, which would be couple dancing, and another one would be, I don't know, another kind, Israeli maybe, which was more circle dancing, where you didn't need a partner. And then in the evenings, Thursday and Friday night, they would have a Hungarian night and they would have an Israeli night. And you would dress in your costume. They would feature the dances that the teachers taught. And then all the dances from the different villages. Oh, in San Antonio says, well, in my village, we do it this way. And Houston would say, well, in my village, we do it this way. So, we had talks about and slides and things about the ethnic culture of that country. So they would feature on 2 countries each time. So they were really great things. It wasn't just dancing. It was that whole immersion in ethnic culture. So it was fun. So it's always.
All right, here's another question. Is the Danube navigable by cruise ship from the Black Sea?
Very definitely, yes. There are cruise ships that go up and down. You can get them all the way from, at least from Prague. I did a biking trip along the Danube from Regensburg. I was asking about that. Regensburg, Passau, all along there, Melk, to Vienna. So I did a cross-country bike trip with Road Scholar one year. But not at a perfect pace, because it was about 129 miles, I think. So as cross-country biking goes, it wasn't, quote, all that far, but it's faster than walking, and it's not as fast as in a car. You can stop and you're on a bike path most of the time or on a less used road. And so it's a perfect pace to go through a country like that along the Danube. And we stopped many times to see different things. We stopped at the Mauthausen concentration camp. We of course we had a tour in Vienna and in Passau and Grein, visited the Melk Abbey. So it was about 10 days, I think. So it's a
So was
really
this,
good way in that area.
were you on the cruise ship and they let you off to do the bike trip and met you later?
No, this was a continuous bike trip. It wasn't a cruise ship at all.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
There are lots of boats that go just from one city to another that are just transportation. You can get on, and that's true of the Rhine as well. You don't have to be like on a Viking cruise. You can take, you don't want to bike that day, say, for example, which wasn't the case, but say you didn't want to bike that day, you could get on and pass on, just got off at the next stop where you're going to meet your people for the evening. That's easy enough. It's like taking the bus.
Okay.
But there are cruises, definitely cruises, like you would take a Viking cruise or the number of cruise companies. And some years, both the Rhine and the Danube have flooded. You could see floodwater the year before when I did the bike trip. You could see it all the way to the top of the banks, where they had maybe concrete banks or steps or something. The water, how high the water level had been. So they do have flooding along both those rivers, but yes, there is cruise ship travel and quote local bus type thing, ferry travel.
Okay. Were you able to tour Roman catacombs in Budapest?
No, I didn't do that. I really didn't do anything about the Roman architecture at all. There's really very little of it, but there is some that you can see there. Yes.
Okay, and then let's see, Peggy from Fort Collins asked, were the buildings all these styles, where was the money coming from? What was Hungary famous for?
First question, that's hard to say. I mean, where does any money in any country come for building any building? For churches, certainly through the Catholic Church, it's a mainly Catholic country. There are some synagogues and at this point probably some Muslim mosques, but mainly a Catholic country. So through the church would be a lot of them. Through the government for some of the government buildings, and through the monuments, which would be tax money. But other, private enterprise, people with headquarters there of companies that would build these and decorate them. I mean, just like any country, I guess.
And can I add something to that?
Yes.
They had a big celebration there in 1898, that 1,000-year celebration of the Magyars,
Yeah.
and the government gave a whole lot of money to build the buildings, and that's why a lot of them are in such a similar style.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad
yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up, because in that first slide when I had a lot of the text about why you didn't see earlier buildings, a lot of the main just residential areas were torn down. This happened in Bucharest too. If you saw the one on Romania, where Ceausescu just tore down acres and miles worth of buildings, even beautiful buildings, and built his palace. Well, this happened in Budapest as well, and in places like Rome and places like Paris. These grand boulevards didn't happen by accident. They tore the people in power at that time just tore out buildings and built their grand boulevards and their archways and their monuments and all that kind of stuff. This was not uncommon. Vienna, a little bit different story. One of the main big avenues is the Ring Road. And that was built from the wall that was torn down that was around Vienna. And so they didn't have to tear out as many buildings to have a grand boulevard. All they did was tear down their wall and built it there. So this happened really a lot in major cities, is tearing out and building in the newer styles. And of course, they're doing that everywhere now, China, Japan, whatever. And it's just, I'm grand. I want my name on this boulevard and, all this sort of stuff. It's kings, it's power, it's government money.
Did Budapest have, like Eva lived there, but did many people actually live in the city?
Oh yeah, it's a big city. Big city has a lot of big population. There are people that live even in these buildings. She remodeled an apartment or renovated. She lives in the US 3 months, and then in Budapest for 3 months, and then off and on. And she, as I say, she came from a wealthy family. They were able to bring some of that with them to the US, and then she married well. So she had some money to bring back money, because when we went to a dictatorship in recent years, a lot of social net dropped off, and there less money was available or paid to orphanages, to old people's social security types of programs. And she is very generous in not only bringing her own money and her own purse to Vienna, to Budapest to support these things, but she still knows people from the old days who she hits up for money to to help support these. So she's a very generous philanthropist and money raiser to help these people who now who have been neglected by their government.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's see, we have a couple more. Carol Barron said, they told us that the only good thing about communism was that then there was no graffiti.
Yeah, well, that's probably true. The communists were not well liked. And of course, that's why they had that uprising and were put down very seriously. And it was much later till they got independence. And then they let their democracy slip away from them too. Theoretically, it's a democracy, but really it's not. They now have a dictatorship.
Okay, Carol also said that what I thought might be white carrots, said maybe they were, or maybe they could be white radishes.
That's certainly possible. I'm not the expert on that.
Stan and Sandra said in Europe, people live in apartments that are often like 600 years old. Buildings are that old.
Yes. Yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about that renovation she did. As I said, she goes back and forth, and she bought this building and basically tore out everything, and except the ceiling. It had one of these copper ceilings, which are pretty expensive. But she had workmen coming in and putting in new bathrooms, laying tile, painting the walls, putting in lighting fixtures, etc. I mean, it was complete from scratch. And came back to the US and was here 3 months and went back, and everything was gone except the ceiling. So in other words, it was either stolen by the workmen or whoever had the key or people who broke in, but everything was gone. Lighting fixtures, toilets, sinks, kitchen appliances, you name it, everything was gone. So this problem of not only just pickpockets, but rampant stealing is common now. And the other thing she told me was that you have to pay somebody to do anything you want, even your doctor or a bus driver or people that you would normally not tip in our country. Anybody you want anything anybody to do anything for you. Or to do your taxes, you have to not only pay your bill, but you have to give them a little something under the table. So this is the way it works now. Your dentist, you name it.
Interesting. Wow.
So there's a lot of corruption.
Okay. Geneva wanted to know, how old is Budapest?
Well, it came from Roman times. It was there in Roman times. We don't really know how long it's been there. As we said, the Magyars came about the year 1000. And so I don't know who was there before them. You know, obviously somebody was living there. We know the Celtic people came from Central Europe. They may have come from them, but they from that region or somewhere and moved through up into the British Isles more or less. But they're in various places along the way. But the Magyars are the ones who've been there since about 1100 and brought the Hungarian language, which is, as I say, unique and difficult.
Okay, let's see. Jeanette in New Jersey said, I was in Hungary while under Russian control, and again after, that there was a big difference in the people and freedom.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Well, I think that goes along with what Ava's told me too, that there was a lot of Russian rule, you know, was pretty harsh. And of course, they had an uprising. I mean, if it's that bad, people want to get rid of it. And they were glad to have independence. And then, you know, they let it slip away again. So I don't know what's the problem.
Let's see.
Look at the companies too. There are different ones that do it. The Road Scholar people contracted with. Oh, I'm trying to think. It's a biking company too. Backroads is one of them. In fact, my daughter's going on with Backroads in Europe. It wasn't Backroads that we did that with, but there was another biking company, tour company.
Okay. So I don't know if everybody's already watching their chat screen or not, but Diana Mente said that she had done 2 bike tours with Trad Natura, a company run by a very sweet couple from Budapest, if anybody was interested. They also have tours in Italy and Australia. So I think that's all of the questions. Does anyone, if you want to stop screen share, Mary, and we can see everyone and see if anybody else has any questions.